The memory, a sliver of ice in the marrow, often caught me unawares. It was a place of muted sighs and the sterile scent of despair, a dim hospital hallway with no staff, machines quietly breathing. The rhythmic hiss and whoosh, the faint, insistent beep, were the only sounds that dared to break the profound silence. I could almost feel the chill of the linoleum beneath my bare feet, the weight of an unspoken word heavy on my tongue. Then, as quickly as it came, the vision would recede, leaving behind only a phantom ache and the persistent need for escape. That need had driven me here, to this place. The winding country lanes, barely more than gravel paths, had narrowed further with each mile, swallowing the last vestiges of civilization. The car, an old beast of burden I'd inherited alongside this very house, groaned in protest, its tires spitting stones. Dusk was bleeding across the sky, painting the distant hills in bruised purples and grays, and the air grew thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient pines. Solitude, I had craved it like a starving man craves bread, a balm for the ragged edges of my soul. This inheritance, a gift from a relative I had never known, felt less like a windfall and more like a final, desperate gamble. Then, through a break in the gnarled oaks, it appeared. The Manor. It did not rise. It simply was. A hulking silhouette against the fading light. Turrets clawed at the sky, and 1,000 eyes of glass, grimy with neglect, stared out blankly. A rusted iron gate, half open as if in a perpetual sigh, guarded a long, overgrown drive. Hope, a fragile thing, warred with a tremor of apprehension in my chest. This was not merely a house. It was a testament to forgotten time, a monument to lives lived and, perhaps, lost within its walls. I parked the car, its engine ticking softly as it cooled, the only sound in the vast, encroaching stillness. The air here was different, heavier, carrying the scent of decay and damp earth, overlaid with something else. A faint, almost imperceptible sweetness, like dried potpourri gone wrong. The front door, a heavy slab of oak carved with intricate swirling patterns that looked like grasping tendrils, yielded with a groan that echoed through the cavernous foyer. Dust motes danced in the last slivers of natural light filtering through the tall, leaded windows. My footsteps on the polished, scuffed floorboards resonated with an unnerving clarity, each sound amplified by the sheer emptiness. I moved through the echoing halls, a ghost in my own new domain. The walls, once grand with wallpaper, now peeled in curling strips, revealing layers of past lives. I found myself drawn deeper, not by curiosity alone, but by a subtle, almost imperceptible pull. A whisper in the quiet that promised something more. Its surface was scarred, as if clawed at, and a tarnished brass lock, intricate and archaic, sealed it shut. My fingers traced the cold metal, a strange current passing through me. The key, heavy and ornate, had been among the jumble left by the estate lawyer. It slid into the lock with a rusty sigh, turning with a reluctant click. The door scraped open, revealing a space that seemed to hold its breath. It was a smaller chamber, windowless and utterly choked with dust. And there it was. On a small, ornate table in the center of the room, half hidden beneath a shroud of cobwebs and fine gray dust, sat an object that seemed to hum with its own peculiar energy. An antique music box. My breath hitched. An inexplicable pull, a magnetic force drew me forward. My fingers, trembling slightly, reached for it, brushing away the dust. The wood was cool, smooth, almost alive beneath my touch. This was not merely an object. It felt like a silent, watchful heart, beating in the dust-choked quiet of this forgotten room. The silence of the manor, once a balm, had begun to acquire a weight, a texture. It pressed against my ears, not empty, but pregnant with unseen things. I spent my days in a slow, deliberate dance with domesticity, unpacking boxes, arranging books on shelves that bowed under the weight of forgotten histories. Each task was a small anchor, meant to tether me to the present, to the quiet solitude I had come here seeking. Yet, even in the most mundane moments, my mind would drift, a leaf caught in an unseen current, back to that place. The rhythmic hiss and whoosh, the faint, insistent beep, were the only sounds that dared to break the oppressive stillness. I would pull myself back, shake my head as if dislodging a stubborn cobweb, and focus on the rough grain of the antique wardrobe, the faint scent of cedar and dust. This house, I told myself, was a new beginning. I was determined to make it so. I swore I had closed the heavy oak door leading to the unused drawing room, latched it with a satisfying click. It was an old house, I reasoned, prone to drafts and settling. Wood warped, latches failed. The air here was heavy with the scent of aged paper and something else, something subtly metallic, like old pennies left in the rain. It was formless, without words, yet undeniably there. My heart gave a frantic flutter, a bird trapped in a cage. Imagination. I scoffed aloud, the sound thin and unconvincing in the cavernous space. The wind playing tricks. But there was no wind, not inside these thick walls. The following days brought a quiet intensification of these small disturbances. Footfalls, light and quick, would patter on the floorboards above me when I knew myself to be alone on the lower level. I'd pause my reading, straining to hear, but the sounds would cease, leaving only the relentless tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. Objects would shift subtly. A ceramic teacup placed precisely on its saucer would be found an inch or two away, as if nudged by an invisible hand. I began to check the locks on the windows, the latches on the doors, with an almost obsessive diligence. Each time, they were secure. One evening, I sat by the fire, a book open on my lap, though my eyes stared blankly into the dancing flames. The house groaned around me, a symphony of ancient wood and settling stone. I had found it tucked away in a dusty cabinet in the drawing room, its intricate carvings hinting at a forgotten elegance. I had wound it once, just to hear its delicate, almost mournful melody, then closed it, placing it carefully out of reach. It was the music box. A single crystalline note, then another, weaving into a fragile, eerie melody. It was the same tune I had heard before, but now it played on its own, without my touch. The sound was so delicate, so ethereal, that for a moment I doubted my own ears. I held my breath, every muscle in my body tensed. My mind scrambled for a rational explanation. A draft? The vibrations of the house? A mechanism that had simply decided to uncoil itself? I pushed myself from the chair, my limbs stiff, and approached the mantelpiece. The music box sat there, still and silent now, its lid firmly closed. There was no tremor in the wood, no sign of recent movement. I had felt it. It was not the wind. It was not imagination. The house was not merely settling. Something within its ancient walls was stirring, and it was beginning to play a tune I did not recognize, a melody that promised to unravel more than just my peace. Yet, the house resisted my efforts to tame it, to make it merely a dwelling. It breathed. A faint, metallic scent, like old blood mixed with dust, would sometimes drift from the floorboards, only to dissipate before I could pinpoint its origin. The air itself grew heavy, thick with something I could not name. Shadows, once mere absences of light, seemed to deepen, to gather in corners like watchful things. Just the vast, echoing quiet, broken only by the rhythmic creak of the old house settling, or, perhaps, unsettling. Sleep, which I had hoped would offer respite, became a different kind of prison. The first nightmare descended with the weight of a stone slab. The air was frigid, sterile, carrying a faint, acrid tang that scraped at the back of my throat. Fluorescent lights, buzzing faintly overhead, cast a sickly, yellowish glow on institutional linoleum and closed doors. The quiet breathing of the machines was not comforting. It was a mechanical mimicry of life, a constant low thrum that spoke of things sustained artificially, of bodies held in limbo. I felt a profound, aching helplessness, a familiar grief that tightened around my chest like iron bands. My feet were rooted, my voice caught, a scream trapped somewhere behind my ribs. The sterile tang of the dream clung to my nostrils, even in the musty air of the bedroom. The image of those identical doors, the quiet, relentless breathing of unseen machines, lingered with an unwelcome vividness. It was a phantom echo of a past I desperately sought to outrun. This was a place where old wounds were reopened, where the air itself seemed to vibrate with unspoken sorrows. The unsettling encounter spurred a new, frantic energy in me. I gravitated towards the Manor's sprawling, dust-laden library. Rows upon rows of forgotten tomes, their spines cracked and faded, offered a promise of forgotten truths. I began to comb through them, my fingers growing grimy with the accumulated grime of decades. I sought anything pertaining to the Manor's history, its previous inhabitants. Most of the books were unremarkable, dusty chronicles of local flora or dated poetry. It wasn't a personal diary, but rather a collection of clippings, transcribed notes, and fragmented observations, all pertaining to the property. The entries were sparse, often cryptic. One passage, written in a shaky, almost frantic hand, spoke of the music box, not as a charming trinket, as the vessel, the key to the waking. Another described the slow corruption of the spirit and the emptiness that follows the song. There was no clear narrative, no definitive explanation, only a growing tapestry of unease and unanswered questions. A single faint note, high and mournful, drifted from the direction of the music room. A note I recognized from the antique music box. I hadn't wound it. I hadn't touched it since the first day. They were closer, more insistent, like dry leaves skittering across a stone floor just beyond my understanding. I spun around, my heart quickening, but saw only the familiar, unsettling grandeur of the empty hallway. Sleep offered no true escape. That night, the dreams were more vivid, more terrifying. The music box played relentlessly, its tinkling melody warped into a maddening, discordant dirge that echoed the fragmented tragedies I had just read. I saw reflections of myself in every polished surface, but they were not quite me. I was no longer merely unsettled. I was trapped, and the house, alive and malevolent, was closing in. My determination, a brittle shield against the encroaching quiet, kept me moving, kept my hands busy. The wood of the chest was dark, aged almost to petrification, and smelled of camphor and dried roses. Beneath a layer of moth-eaten lace and yellowed linens, my fingers brushed against something hard and leathery. I pulled it out. It was a book, no, a journal, bound in what might have once been deep crimson leather, now cracked and faded to the color of dried blood. Its spine was broken, the pages within swollen and discolored by time and damp. A faint, cloying scent of mildew and something else, something metallic and sweet, like old, forgotten perfume wafted from it. Curiosity, a dangerous, eager thing, pricked at me. This was not just any old book. It felt heavy with unspoken words, with a life that had been lived and perhaps unlived within these very walls. I carried it to the window, the daylight, though pale and thin, illuminating the elegant, spidery script on the first page. The ink had bled in places, blurring the cursive, but enough remained legible to piece together the narrative. The journal belonged to a previous owner, a woman, her name lost to the erosion of time on the title page. Her early entries spoke of the Manor's grandeur, its quiet charm, much as I had once perceived it. She detailed her arrival, her hopes for a peaceful life, her fascination with the intricate music box that now sat, a silent sentinel, on my own mantelpiece. As I read, the words on the page seemed to vibrate, pulling me into her slow, terrifying descent. It was not localized to the window, but seemed to emanate from the very air around me, a pocket of unnatural frigidity that defied logic. The hair on my nape stood on end. I shivered, but kept reading, compelled by a morbid fascination. The journal's tone shifted, becoming more frantic, the sentences shorter, punctuated by exclamation points and desperate pleas. The music box became a recurring, ominous motif. She described its melodies playing on their own, a delicate tinkling sound that would lure her, drawing her closer, closer, until she felt a strange, suffocating embrace. It wants something from me. Another entry read, scrawled in a hasty, almost illegible hand. It feeds on the quiet. It was gone before I could properly focus, a mere distortion in the air, but it left a lingering impression of something tall, attenuated, and profoundly wrong. This was not the trick of tired eyes. This was a deliberate manifestation, a recognition of my reading. The journal plunged deeper into her paranoia. The entity, nameless yet ever present in her writings, began to prey on her vulnerabilities, her past regrets, twisting them into vivid, waking nightmares. "It knows," she wrote, the words smeared as if by tears or sweat. "It knows what I lost. It plays it back to me over and over until I cannot tell if it is memory or waking horror." My own memories, sharp and unwelcome, began to surface, unbidden. The entity was not just present, it was reaching, probing, finding the rawest edges of my soul. It was a voice like dry leaves skittering across cold stone, yet it formed a word, a single insidious word that echoed a name I had buried deep within myself, a name I had vowed never to speak aloud again. It was a direct address, a malevolent greeting. It was no longer a question of whether something resided in these walls. It was a certainty. And it knew me. It knew my past, my vulnerabilities, and it was ready to claim me, just as it had claimed the one who had meticulously, despairingly, recorded her own descent within these decaying pages. I dropped the journal, its crimson cover landing with a soft thud on the worn carpet. A silent testament to the horror that had finally, undeniably, made itself known. The sterile scent of disinfectant, sharp and suffocating, clawed at my throat, dragging me back to a place I had fought so desperately to forget. The fluorescent glow, an unnatural mockery of daylight, pressed down on me, heavy and relentless. My lungs constricted, a raw, burning ache blossoming with each shallow gasp. Then, with a shudder that ripped through my very bones, the illusion fractured. The chill of the Manor's air, thick with the scent of aged wood and forgotten dust, replaced the antiseptic sting. I pressed a trembling hand against my forehead, finding it clammy. The memory, a phantom limb of my past, had been so vivid, so cruelly real. This house, I realized, was a merciless alchemist. They were reflections, amplified and distorted, of my own internal landscape. The entity, this unseen predator, was not just in the house. It was of the house, feeding on the very essence of my despair, growing stronger with each tremor of my fear, each pang of my isolation. My gaze drifted to the music box, still resting on the small, claw-footed table where I had last placed it. Its intricate carvings, once merely curious, now seemed to writhe, the tiny figures caught in a silent scream. It was its anchor, its cage, its prison, or perhaps its very source. It drew strength from my vulnerability, a parasitic bloom thriving on the decay of my spirit. A strange, fierce resolve ignited within me, burning through the icy grip of fear. If the music box was its tether, then severing that tether was my only hope. It was a desperate, almost suicidal thought, but the alternative to simply surrender, to be consumed like the previous inhabitants of this cursed place was utterly unthinkable. You are weak. You are alone. This is your fate. But I pushed back, a sudden surge of defiance hardening my jaw. The delicate brass mechanisms, the tiny winding key, seemed to mock me with their fragility. Yet I knew better. This was no ordinary antique. Its iron tip, thick and blunt, promised destruction. With the music box clutched in one hand, I snatched the poker with the other. The air in the antechamber grew thick, heavy, pressing down on me like a physical weight. I raised the poker, its cold metal a stark contrast to the burning resolve in my chest. The music box pulsed in my grip, almost warm now, its surface seeming to ripple under my touch. This is madness. A part of me screamed, "You are only enraging it." But another, more primal part roared back, "Destroy it." With a guttural cry torn from my throat, I brought the poker down, aiming for the intricate lid of the music box. The impact was not what I expected. Instead of the satisfying crack of splintering wood or shattering metal, there was a deafening clang, a sound of impossibly dense material striking unyielding iron. The music box did not break. It did not even dent. A shriek, raw and ancient, tore through the air, not from my own lips, but from the very fabric of the house itself. The room exploded. A heavy armchair, its velvet faded and worn, scraped violently across the polished floorboards, slamming into the wall with a splintering thud. Books, bound in leather and brittle with age, ripped themselves from the shelves, pages fluttering like dying birds as they flew across the room, some striking me with surprising force. The ornate chandelier above me swung wildly, its crystal pendants clinking a frantic, discordant tune, casting dancing points of light that distorted the scene into a horrifying tableau. Windows rattled in their frames, the glass groaning as if under immense pressure, threatening to shatter inwards. I stumbled back, dropping the poker with a clatter, clutching the music box even tighter as an unseen force slammed into my chest, knocking the wind from my lungs. I gasped, falling backwards over a footstool, my head striking the hard floor with a sickening crack. My vision swam, the room spinning around me, and through it all, piercing the cacophony of destruction, the music box began to play. Not the delicate tinkling melody I had heard before, but a distorted, discordant dirge, each note a twisted shriek of triumph and fury. It was a mocking, malevolent lullaby, sung by the entity I had so foolishly attempted to defy. I scrambled to my feet, my body aching, my mind reeling, the music box still clutched in my hand, its unyielding form a testament to my failure. The entity was not merely enraged, it was unleashed. And I, battered and broken, was its willing, if unwilling, audience. The poker, heavy and cold in my grip, descended with the fury of a desperate man. My bones vibrated with the shock. A wave of force, not physical but utterly crushing, erupted from the music box, slamming into my chest. It was a silent scream that ripped through the air, stripping sound from the room, leaving only a profound, ringing emptiness inside my skull. My vision blurred, the study walls warping, stretching like wet canvas. The air grew impossibly thick, pressing in, stealing my breath. I felt myself falling, not through space, but through a chasm of pure, frigid despair. The world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of screaming shadows and icy silence. My own cry, a raw animal sound, was swallowed whole before it could escape my throat. The walls were a pale, institutional green, streaked with faint, unidentifiable stains. The quiet was not peaceful. It was a profound, suffocating absence, punctuated only by the rhythmic, almost mechanical sighs of unseen devices. Shh. A steady, monotonous pulse, like a dying heartbeat. Where was I? How? The study, the music box, the manor. They were gone, replaced by this sterile purgatory. My mind reeled, trying to grasp the impossible transition. Had I been knocked unconscious? Was this a dream? My sister. Her face, pale and still, flashed behind my eyes. The entity, it was here. It had followed me, or rather, it had brought me here. This was its trap, a cruel stage for my deepest guilt. I stumbled forward, needing to escape, to deny the accusation. The hallway stretched on, an endless corridor of identical doors, each one closed, silent. The machines continued their soft, relentless breathing. Shh. It sounded like a ventilator, keeping something barely alive, or perhaps keeping me from truly living. You could have saved her. Another voice, deeper, laced with a mournful echo, seeped from the walls. It was my father's voice, distorted, filled with an ancient sorrow. The words were not spoken aloud, but seeped directly into the raw, exposed nerves of my mind. I pressed my hands against my ears, but the sound was internal, a phantom echo of every regret I'd ever nursed. The hallway seemed to narrow, the pale green walls closing in. The air grew heavy, like breathing underwater. I could feel eyes on me, countless unseen eyes, judging, accusing. The quiet breathing of the machines intensified, becoming a chorus of choked sobs, then a frantic, desperate gasp. A door at the far end of the hallway creaked open, just a sliver. Lilies, the scent of a funeral. This wasn't a physical place. It was a prison built from my own grief, woven by the entity's cruel artistry. The machine's breathing grew ragged, desperate. Hensh, hensh. It was a struggle for air, a struggle I knew too well. I pushed against the floor, scrambled to my feet, and ran. My foot caught on something unseen, and I pitched forward, my head striking the hard floor with a sickening crack. When I next opened my eyes, the familiar, unsettling pattern of the study's wallpaper swam into focus. I was back. My body ached, a deep, bruising pain radiating from my temple and ribs. The poker lay innocently beside the music box, which remained pristine, untouched, mocking my failed attempt. I dragged myself to the window. Outside, the world was still, cloaked in an unnatural twilight, though the hour should have been mid-morning. The sky was an unbroken sheet of bruised gray. I pulled out my phone. Dead. Not just low battery, but completely unresponsive. I tried the landline. No dial tone. I stumbled to the garage, desperate for an escape. My car, usually reliable, coughed once, twice, then fell silent, the engine refusing to catch. I tried again, my hands trembling on the steering wheel, but it was useless. The entity had not just attacked me, it had isolated me, cut me off. It had tightened its invisible net, and I was now truly alone, trapped within its grasp. The manor, once a refuge, had become my cage. I was its, and it was just beginning. My flight was a blur of frantic motion, a desperate scramble through the suffocating dark. The manor's shadows, once merely deep, now seemed to coalesce, reaching, grasping. I pushed through the suffocating air, a wild primal urge to escape driving my limbs. Then a sudden jarring dislocation. I opened my eyes, or perhaps I simply became aware, to a new, unsettling reality. I was no longer in the manor. The walls were a sterile, pale green, peeling in places, hinting at an age far removed from anything modern. The air was cool, carrying the faint metallic scent of something long abandoned, mingled with the ghost of disinfectant. No voices, no footsteps, only the soft, rhythmic sighs and clicks of unseen machines behind closed doors. Each breath they drew seemed to pull the air from my own lungs. The doors lining its length were uniform, impersonal, offering no hint of what lay beyond. I pressed my palm against one, the surface cool and smooth beneath my touch, yet unyielding. This wasn't a place of healing. It was a mausoleum of quiet despair, a purgatory of polished linoleum and muted hums. The entity, I realized with a sickening lurch, was playing with me, twisting my reality, showing me a new facet of its boundless, horrifying power. The machines continued their soft, mechanical breathing, a constant mocking reminder of life that was utterly absent. Then, as abruptly as I had arrived, the hallway fractured. The pale green walls rippled like water. The flickering lights exploded into a cascade of fractured colors, and the rhythmic breathing of the machines dissolved into a cacophony of shrieks. I fell, or rather was thrown, back into the brutal, tangible reality of the manor. My head swam, the phantom scent of disinfectant clinging to my nostrils. I lay there for a long moment, gasping, my chest heaving. The experience in the hallway had stripped away the last vestiges of my complacency. Running was useless. Hiding was futile. The entity could reach me anywhere, twist my perception, make me doubt my own sanity. I had to fight. It was my only weapon, my only hope. The air was thick, heavy, as if the very molecules were resisting my movements. I stumbled towards the desk, my fingers fumbling for the worn leather cover of the journal. I flipped through the pages, my eyes scanning frantically, searching for anything I might have missed, any clue, any hidden meaning. The previous entries, filled with the rambling anxieties of the manor's former inhabitant, seemed insufficient, irrelevant. I needed something more. My gaze snagged on a section near the back, a series of entries written in a hurried, almost panicked hand, distinct from the meticulous script that preceded it. I leaned closer, my breath catching in my throat. The true binding is not of the wood, nor of the brass, but of the song itself. Not with steel, but with the earth's own lament, offered where the first sorrow of the sun touches the ancient heartstone. Only then may the melody cease, and the devourer retreat to the place of unmaking. My eyes trace the words again, my mind struggling to grasp their meaning. The earth's own lament, first sorrow of the sun, ancient heartstone. It wasn't a simple banishment. It was an undoing, a severance. The music box was merely the instrument, the vessel, as the previous inhabitant had called it. This wasn't a simple ghost story. This was an ancient evil bound by ancient rules. The words implied a specific location within the manor, a specific time, and a specific offering. The earth's own lament. What could that be? Soil? A plant? Or something far more sinister, a sacrifice of blood or spirit? A faint, discordant note, like a single plucked string from the music box, echoed from somewhere within the house, thin and reedy. The air around me grew frigid, raising gooseflesh on my arms. The entity knew. It felt my discovery, my nascent understanding. It was reacting, tightening its invisible grip. A terrifying plan began to form in my mind, a desperate, dangerous gamble born of utter desperation. I didn't understand all of it, not yet, but the words were a thread, a path through the labyrinth of fear. There was no escape, only this perilous, cryptic path to salvation or damnation. The ancient notes, scrawled on brittle parchment, lay before me, illuminated by the trembling flame of a single beeswax candle. Its scent, sweet and cloying, did little to mask the creeping chill that had begun to seep from the very bones of the house. The music box sat open, its intricate gears still, its melody a silent echo in the suffocating quiet. Tonight, I would attempt to sever the cord, to banish the insidious presence that had taken root in my inherited sanctuary, and in my mind. Determination, cold and sharp as a shard of ice, cut through the familiar tremor of fear. I began. They were not prayers, but invocations, a language meant to bind and unbind, to stir the primal forces of the earth itself. The air thickened, pressing against my skin like an unseen weight. A low hum began, Not from the music box, but from the very floorboards beneath my bare feet, a resonant thrum that vibrated up my spine. It was the house, waking, resisting. I pressed on, my gaze fixed on the parchment, my will a fragile shield against the encroaching chaos. The hum intensified, becoming a guttural growl that resonated deep within my chest. A grandfather clock in the corner began to sway, its pendulum arrested, its chimes frozen. A porcelain doll on a nearby shelf tilted its head, its painted eyes, once vacant, now seeming to fix on me with an unnerving, knowing intensity. The scent of decaying flowers, a cloying sweetness that hinted at long-dead things, filled the room, making my stomach churn. I reached the heart of the ritual, the phrase that spoke of the ancient heartstone and the place of unmaking. As the words left my lips, the music box shuddered violently, its lid snapping shut with a resounding clap that echoed through the vast, empty rooms. Then it manifested. It was the inverse of light, a ravenous hunger made manifest. It was a pressure, a weight of ages, a consciousness so ancient and malevolent it threatened to unravel my very being. My mind, already stretched thin, buckled under the assault. The air here was heavy with the metallic tang of antiseptic and a faint, sweet smell that I recognized with a sickening lurch. The scent of fading life. The rhythmic thump-thump of a heart monitor, slow and deliberate, filled the unnatural quiet. This was a conjuration, a trap. But the details were too vivid, too painfully real. The faint scratches on the linoleum floor, the muted reflections in the polished chrome of the IV stands, the hushed, almost reverent quality of the air. It was a place etched into the deepest, most scarred chambers of my memory. Then a door at the far end of the hallway creaked open, just a sliver. Through the gap, I saw it. A pale, still hand lying on a white sheet. My breath hitched. The machines, quietly breathing, seemed to mock my own struggling lungs. They were judging me, condemning me for my inability, my weakness. The entity was a master of psychological torment, peeling back the layers of my carefully constructed piece, exposing the festering wounds beneath. It was laughing, a silent, echoing mirth that vibrated through my very bones. It was feeding on my despair, growing stronger with every fresh wave of grief and self-loathing it forced upon me. The ritual was fading from my mind, replaced by the overwhelming, suffocating weight of my past. My knees threatened to buckle. The truth of its power, its ability to burrow into the deepest crevices of my soul, was a revelation more terrifying than any physical manifestation. It wasn't just trying to stop me. It was trying to consume me, to break me down into nothing but a vessel of sorrow. I would not let it win. The mournful thump-thump of the distant monitor, a phantom heartbeat, echoed the frantic pulse beneath my own ribs. My lungs felt too small for the suffocating dread that pressed in from all sides. My loved ones, their features twisted by an agony I had caused, by a disappointment that seeped into my very bones. It was not a single voice, but a chorus of condemnations, each note a chisel against the fragile edifice of my sanity. You seek peace, but you carry the rot within. It feeds on you. The static hum of the machines seemed to amplify the entity's taunts, turning them into a deafening roar inside my skull. It was a maelstrom of fear and guilt, threatening to tear me apart, piece by agonizing piece. But through the swirling chaos, a flicker of something stubborn, something unyielding remained. Determination. The ritual. It was the only way. The old texts, the frantic scrawls I deciphered in the Manor's hidden alcoves, they spoke of a final, terrible price. Not a life, not a material offering, but something deeper, more profound. To banish it, I had to sever that connection, to starve it of its sustenance. The sacrifice, I realized with a sickening lurch, was not a thing to be given. but a thing to be released. I closed my eyes, the spectral faces of my loved ones still burning behind my eyelids. The entity roared, a sound like tearing fabric, as if it sensed my resolve. You cannot escape your nature, Raj. You are a vessel for sorrow, a conduit for despair. I gripped the worn wooden music box I held, its cool surface a strange anchor in the swirling madness. It hummed with a malevolent energy, a pulse that resonated with the phantom thumps in the hallway. It was the binding, the conduit through which the entity tethered itself to this world, to me. My voice, when it came, was a raw, guttural sound, barely audible above the entity's shrieks. No, I rasped, I am not. I am a survivor. The images intensified. My greatest fears, my deepest regrets paraded before me. The moment of my personal tragedy, replayed with cruel clarity, every sound, every sight, every agonizing second. The entity wanted me to drown in it, to surrender to the crushing weight of what I had lost, of what I believed I had caused. It was the ultimate defiance. I release the guilt. I release the fear. You have no hold here. The music box began to vibrate violently in my hands, its antique carvings blurring. A high-pitched shriek, not of the entity but of the box itself, pierced the air. The fragments of faces dissolved into smoke, their accusatory eyes replaced by swirling vortexes of pure, unadulterated rage. I squeezed my eyes shut, focusing every ounce of my will, every fiber of my being on that single impossible act of self-forgiveness. I poured my defiance, my acceptance, into the music box. A brilliant, searing light erupted from the object, blinding even through my closed eyelids. The world shook, a violent, bone-rattling tremor that threatened to shatter me. Then, with a final, earth-shattering crack that seemed to split the universe, it was gone. The blinding flash vanished. The deafening roar ceased. A profound, absolute silence descended. My eyes fluttered open. I was standing in the center of the Manor's drawing room, the air still. The only light, the pale, bruised gray of the approaching dawn through the tall windows. The music box lay shattered at my feet, its delicate gears and polished wood reduced to splintered fragments, utterly inert. It was over. Or so it seemed. The silence was deafening, a hollow echo where a symphony of torment had once played. I stood trembling, utterly drained, the ghost of my loved ones' faces still imprinted on my mind, but now perhaps softened, no longer accusatory. The sacrifice had been made. The choice, agonizingly, had been mine. Walls no longer stood firm, but rippled like disturbed water, then began to stretch, their painted surfaces peeling away in long, grotesque strips. The faint hum of unseen machinery escalated into a deafening roar, a cacophony that vibrated through my bones, threatening to shatter them. I felt the floor beneath me give way, a sudden sickening drop into an abyss of pure noise and disorienting motion. Colors blurred into a violent smear of gray and white, then dissolved entirely into an absolute, suffocating blackness. My grip on the music box, once firm, became useless as I was flung, tumbling into an unfathomable void. The air was ripped from my lungs, and then, mercifully, nothing. My body ached with a dull, pervasive throb, as if I had been beaten, every muscle protesting the slightest movement. Above me, the familiar, ornate ceiling of the manor stretched, intact and unblemished, the heavy drapes drawn against the morning light. The air, though still, carried the ghost of old dust and decaying velvet, a scent I had grown to associate with this house. Slowly, painfully, I pushed myself upright, my limbs stiff and uncooperative. My head pounded, a persistent drumbeat behind my eyes. I ran a hand over my face, feeling the grit of dried tears and something else, a faint, sticky residue. My fingers trembled. It looked like any other antique, stripped of its malevolent aura, a forgotten toy. A wave of profound, almost dizzying relief washed over me. It was over. The nightmare, the torment, the suffocating presence. It was gone. I was here, in the manor, alive. But the silence was unnerving. It was too complete, too perfect. There was nothing. Patches of skin on my face were raw, as if scraped by invisible claws, and a deep purple bruise bloomed on my temple. My hands, when I held them up, trembled uncontrollably. I needed to connect, to hear another human voice. My phone, miraculously, lay on the mantelpiece where I had left it days ago, its battery light glowing green. With fumbling fingers, I retrieved it, the cold glass a shock against my clammy skin. I dialed a colleague, a fellow architect I hadn't spoken to since I left the city. The ringing tone, so normal, so mundane, sounded alien in the profound quiet of the study. "Raj, is that really you?" The colleague's voice crackled through the receiver, laced with genuine surprise and a hint of concern. "We were worried. You just vanished. Everything okay?" "Yes," I managed, my voice hoarse and unfamiliar. "Everything's fine, just needed some time away. I'm coming back." The lie tasted like ash. I felt a surge of something akin to hope, a fragile thread connecting me to the world beyond these walls. Yet, the scent of old, damp earth, a smell I had come to associate with the entity, seemed to waft faintly through the air, even though the windows were sealed shut. I inhaled deeply, trying to catch it again, but it was gone, replaced by the mundane scent of dust and old books. A shiver traced its way down my spine. I tried to dismiss it, to focus on the reality of the phone call, the promise of returning to a normal life. But the manor, now utterly silent, felt more menacing than it ever had when the entity was overtly active. Its quiet was not peaceful. It was watchful. Every creak of the floorboards under my weight, every rustle of my clothes, seemed amplified, scrutinized by an unseen presence. Was it truly gone? Or had it merely retreated, burrowing deeper into the very fabric of the house? Or worse, into the fractured landscape of my own mind? I looked at the music box again, lying innocent and broken. It was just an object now. The final lie had been a whisper, a desperate plea to the empty air, and yet, in its utterance, a door had creaked open. The shadow that had flickered at the edge of my vision was nothing, I told myself, just the residue of a mind frayed by solitude. I would not allow it. The air hung thick with the metallic tang of disuse, a sterile memory of purpose. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light that pierced grimy windows, illuminating peeling paint and cracked linoleum. The machines, hulking silent sentinels, emitted a low, rhythmic sigh, a mechanical exhalation that mirrored my own ragged breaths. Here, I thought, I could truly shed the skin of my past, leave the entity to its crumbling empire. Here, in this forgotten place, I could finally begin to mend. The world outside beckoned, a vibrant, indifferent tapestry of life. I found a small flat in a town hundreds of miles away, a place where the air tasted clean and the nights were quiet, save for the distant murmur of city life. I worked, I ate, I slept. Each mundane act a defiance against the memory of the manor, a small victory in the war for my sanity. I'd freeze, heart thrumming a frantic rhythm against my ribs, straining to hear, but it would always vanish, leaving behind only the hum of the refrigerator or the wind sighing at the window pane. A trick of the mind, I'd reassure myself. A phantom limb of my trauma. Then, the objects began their subtle dance. A book I'd placed carefully on the nightstand would be found on the floor in the morning, spine bent. A teacup left on the counter would appear by the sink. Nothing dramatic, nothing that couldn't be explained away by a clumsy hand or an absent mind. But I knew the unsettling familiarity of it, the quiet, insidious rearrangement of my world. One evening, staring out my living room window at the rain-streaked streetlights. My reflection stared back. But it wasn't just me. For a fleeting instant, a flicker of something ancient, something other, seemed to overlay my features. I blinked, and it was gone, leaving only my own strained, tired face. The true revelation arrived with a brutal, sickening clarity. I was unpacking a box of old mementos, things I had grabbed in my haste, a desperate attempt to salvage some shred of my past. My fingers brushed against something small, hard, and intricately carved. I pulled it out, my breath catching in my throat. Its surface was etched with a minuscule, swirling pattern, identical to the carvings on the music box. It was a piece, unmistakably, of it. How it had come to be in my possession, tucked amongst faded photographs and forgotten trinkets, I could not say. Had it been clinging to my clothes? Had I subconsciously picked it up, a final insidious souvenir? Or had it somehow simply manifested? It was not coming from the sliver of wood. It was coming from everywhere. The entity had never been bound to the manor. It had merely resided there. Its true tether, its true prison, was not stone and mortar, but fear, trauma, and a desperate, fragile human soul. My soul. I was not free. The curse was not broken. It had merely found a new vessel, a new home. My new life, my fresh start, was nothing more than a carefully constructed cage, and I, Raj, was trapped within it. The music box's melody now a silent internal hum, a promise of unending torment.